Chapter 4. Tales from the Flip. By my early 30s, my personal portfolio was about 40 apartment units. I also did site acquisitions for 2 different Birmingham, Alabama-based, family-owned real estate companies that paid me well and kept me stressed out. My wife and I were trying to have children, but the companies I worked for kept me on the road all over the Southeast, which didn't help us to get pregnant. After some soul-searching, we decided I needed to be home more often. So I took a huge cut in pay, traded my suits for jeans and t-shirts, and began augmenting my personal forever portfolio with some hoped-for quick flips. There was a single-family rental home in disrepair next door to my 16-unit property on Felder Avenue in Cloverdale. It wasn't for sale, but after I contacted the owner, we agreed to a price, and I bought it after a short due diligence period. 2 days before closing, a concerned neighbor called my office to warn me. "Do you know the history of the house you're buying?" he asked me. He was a casual friend, but I couldn't figure out how he'd learned I was buying it. For a myriad of reasons, never talk publicly about your acquisition plans before you close your purchase. I tried to change the subject, but he was tenacious and kept pressing. "It's haunted by a very nasty spirit. Whoever moves into that house is in grave peril." I looked down at my watch. It was mid-morning. Too early for this guy to be hammered. The house had a large attic with dormer windows in front and back. The front dormers looked down onto the street. Though I've since heard variants of the story, the one told to me that day was that a couple living there in the 1940s was experiencing marital trouble. After being told by the wife that she was leaving, the husband blew his brains out right in front of her, apparently out of spite. His spirit supposedly never left the house, and he's been seen looking out the front dormer windows, peering down upon the street and sidewalk below, as if he's waiting for his wife to return. Moreover, several different tenants supposedly moved out of the house after being terrorized by the dead husband. There was a pause after this guy told me the tale as I bit my tongue and tried not to laugh. I thanked him for his concern and didn't give the call another thought until I was at the closing table. Before the closing attorney entered the room to start the process, I jokingly referred to the ghost, wondering if the seller had heard the wild stories. He didn't smile and looked me right in the eyes. "I'm not going to lie to you," he said. "It is haunted. I'll understand if you walk away, even at this late point." Given that I had recently been alone in the house for several hours doing the inspections and had not experienced any weirdness, I shrugged off the uneasy feeling I now had and proceeded to purchase the property. Out of curiosity, if any of you know of a legit paranormal real estate due diligence company, reach out to us. Why do I ask? In such a specialized niche, that could be an even better side hustle than real estate investing. Though it was not in the seller's interest to support the ghost story, and his doing so added a smidgen of validity to the rumors, I still refuse to believe that there were nefarious ghosts capable of haunting living people anywhere, let alone on my street. My defense mechanism for not letting it scare me was to make way too many jokes about the situation. In an earlier chapter, I mentioned the phrase lipstick on a pig, which is an industry term for a quick and primarily superficial or cosmetic renovation during a flip. The floor plan and original construction of the haunted house I bought was great. It just needed fresh makeup. Needing to hold down the rehab costs as much as possible, I did much of the work myself, including sanding and refinishing the beautiful hardwood floors. The house before I bought it was heated by a couple of strategically located floor furnaces and cooled by-window air conditioning units. We installed a 5-ton central air conditioning system and gas hydro heat system, which rendered the floor furnaces unnecessary. But to save time and money, I decided to simply leave them in place. As I sanded and refinished the floors, I pulled up the metal grate covers and set them aside. After 3 coats of polyurethane, the floors sprang back to life and seemed to smile at whoever entered the front door. I was so proud of my work, I told my wife I wanted her to come check it out as soon as the floor finish dried sufficiently to be walked on in sock feet. A dear friend of hers who had moved to Foley was coming for a visit that next weekend, and my wife wanted her to be able to see the house too. As they talked on the phone, I got a dirty look as I yelled out that the house was haunted. When our friend came to visit, it was late afternoon. We went straight to the house to be able to tour it with some daylight still present. However, after unlocking the front door, I noticed that it was already too dark to see without lights. Still not as familiar with the house as I should have been, I couldn't find the living room light switch and walked blindly into the house, groping the walls, trying to find the switch. With the girls cautiously following a safe distance behind me, I fell into the still open floor furnace opening and scraped my inner thigh badly. My wife claims I screamed like a little girl. All I know is it hurt like hell. Not fully understanding what had just happened to me, after observing what appeared to be me suddenly disappearing from view while letting out a blood-curdling scream, the 2 girls hightailed it for the door. Only after a few minutes of calm and quiet did my wife stick her head back over the threshold to cautiously ask if I was still alive. Trust me, I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that incident over the years, as it makes for a great, unembellished story. Embellishing it just a little makes it even better. I never saw the ghost or any evidence of it, so I didn't mention it to my buyer until several years after his purchase. When I finally came clean, he laughed it off and said he didn't believe in ghosts. That said, he sold the house just a few months after that to a new sucker. Here's how my flip shook out. I bought the house for $77,000. I put $35,000 into it, which went for a new roof, water heater, and central HVAC. I did all the rest of the work myself and donated my time to the deal. I sold it for $175,000 and paid $10,000 for my share of the closing cost. So I cleared over $50,000 for 90 days of work. Not bad for my first flip? Maybe, but I actually wish I'd taken a bath on it. At this point in my career, I'd never bought a multifamily property intending to spruce it up and flip it. But the haunted house got me rethinking that strategy. First of all, clearing $50,000 for a single-family flip was nice, but I felt like the process wouldn't be that much different employing the same lipstick-on-a-pig approach to bigger deals, and if I could clear just a third of that total per unit, I could make bank. Soon after the ghostly deal closed, I began beating the bushes for a prospective apartment acquisition to reposition in the market and flip. At this point, I should mention that I rarely buy commercial property through a realtor. In fact, most of the apartment deals I've bought were never even on the market. 2 things helped me acquire these types of deals. 1, I did my homework and approached target owners, expressing my interest and offering to save them a broker's fee if and when they decided to sell. And 2, I developed a reputation for making fair deals. Some would say I overpaid, so folks often approached me after I developed a track record when they started thinking about selling. Both strategies require patience. If it's been said once, it's been said 1,000 times. When you're flipping properties, you make your money when you buy the flip, not when you sell it. There's some truth to that, but if you blindly follow this rule of thumb, then you'll have to find a distressed buyer at just the right time and fend off a number of other potential buyers. I chose a different strategy, which started with me seeking value adds through market repositioning. In earlier chapters, I shared horror stories, see what I did there, about awful third-party management or disinterested owners trying to manage their properties from the 12th fairway. Rather than seeking fire sales, I looked for these other elements instead and found plenty of attractive deals. One such opportunity involved 84 units in Dalraida, near Gunter Air Force Station in North Montgomery. Dalraida is a charming, stable neighborhood, not as desirable as Cloverdale, but close. The vacancy rate was excessive, its grounds were perpetually unkept, and the paint was fading on the building exteriors. Oh, and every time I visited the site, the water in the swimming pool looked more like it belonged in a Louisiana swamp. There were just two basic floor plans, a 1 and a 2 bedroom, each having a single bathroom. I brought in a partner and we put $500,000 of equity into the deal, buying it, renovating it, and spit shining it, even converting the gnarly swimming pool to a butterfly garden with a gazebo. Within 9 months, we not only raised the rents a couple of $100 a unit, but we achieved a 100% occupancy rate and had a waiting list. We also decreased operating expenses and had potential buyers beating down our doors. Because of tax ramifications, we couldn't sell it that fast without negative consequences. In our case, to qualify for the long-term capital gains exclusion, we had to own the property for a full year before we could sell it. The buyer wasn't thrilled to wait an extra 90 days, but he stuck around and we doubled our equity after taxes when we closed the sale. By my Mickey Mouse math, that equated to a 100% return on our equity. I used the money to assemble another Cloverdale deal that had very similar circumstances. This one was trickier, though, because it involved numerous properties owned by different entities. There were 120 total contiguous units, and I wanted all of them or none of them. I also knew if the word got out that a single buyer was trying to assemble the block, the last deals we might be able to control would become the most expensive. Despite doing individual contracts using different LLCs and office addresses, our secret got out, and the last 14 units were the most expensive, but were also in the worst shape. However, they sat slap dab in the middle of the block with tenants that loved to shoot machine guns in the air every night for entertainment. The seller was a sleazy realtor who bragged around town that he not only outsmarted me, but he also forced me to pay a ridiculous price for what he himself referred to as his ghetto. Whatever floats your boat, dude, you should be proud. This reno was far more complicated than the Dalraida deal. Before we could start construction in earnest, we had to vacate the entire property. We relocated the few legitimate tenants, which left squatters and drug addicts to deal with. Fortunately for us, they seemed to be noise averse. So every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, 7 days a week, we'd crank up a bevy of painfully obnoxious machines that announced the new day to our squatters. A commercial chip and shredder, which had absolutely no role in the construction, was the last straw for the final holdouts. It was belt-driven, and if you didn't lubricate the belts, its shrieking at about 200 decibels sounded like demons trying to escape Beelzebub's wrath. It had wheels, so we'd observe where folks were squatting the night before and roll it to within a few inches of the bedroom windows the next morning and let it rip. This value add was a major renovation project, and it never got easy. The HVAC units were perpetually being stripped of copper, and we had a ton of lumber stolen from the job. I was finally forced to spend about $100,000 for nightly security, which mitigated the problem. After a slow start, we finally finished the job, and the place leased up to about 97% occupancy rate. Rather than sell it and incur a $1 million tax bill, I decided to put a non-recourse conduit loan in place, which put a little money back in the coffers, but no profit. That would come 3 years later when I sold it outright. Did we make some big cheese? Yes. Did we earn every penny of it? Yes. Would I ever want to go through a job this intense again? No. One per career is enough for me. If you're considering putting a conduit loan in place in order to recover your equity tax-free while leaving your profit in the deal for a later sale, make sure you understand terms like lockout period, assumption restrictions, and defeasance fees. If the timing of your sale is poor as it relates to interest rate trends, a new buyer might not want to assume the conduit loan you put in place, potentially forcing you to suffer a huge prepayment penalty. Oh, and if you're having trouble with squatters, feel free to come borrow my commercial chip and shredder.